Ms. Rand, is there any basic difference between the philosophy of Nietzscheanism and the philosophy of Objectivism?
I would say practically a total basic difference. I'm very anxious to separate Objectivism from Nietzsche altogether. The reason for the mistaken rapprochement that some people hold between my philosophy and that of Nietzsche is that Nietzsche has certain very attractive, very wise quotations that purport to uphold individualism, with which one could agree out of context. But accepting his general feel or feeling for individualism, I would not consider Nietzsche an individualist, and above all, he's certainly not an upholder of reason. When you judge a philosophy, you must always start by judging its fundamentals, and in all fundamentals, particularly metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, Objectivism not only differs from Nietzsche, but is its opposite, his opposite. Therefore, I do not want to be confused with Nietzsche in any respect.
Mr. Gotthelf.
Well, let's get into Nietzsche's philosophy and see precisely what it is he is saying and why Objectivism disagrees. Now, Nietzsche, we know, was a German philosopher who lived between 1844 and 1900 and was in the German Romantic tradition. Now, what Nietzsche himself advocated as a disciple of Schopenhauer and adding his own features were, we know, of course, that reality in essence is a will, the will to power. Now, he never made very clear what that means, except that it's manifested in all natural things, and therefore every action in the world is to be seen as the action of that entity willing for power. Now, he then went on to say that man's reason is not what gets at reality, but man's will, therefore. He further went on to say that as to what the content of this will is, well, it is determined for each man. In ethics, he said that that there really is no rational standard of value. But if there is to be a standard at all, then the good would be the realization of this will to power, and that those men who were born with a certain kind of will, the men he called the supermen, would then will, in effect, would will anything, whatever came to their mind, it seems, and they would go about their life, and the good would be the willing for power, and in the process, what the effects of this on other people would be had no bearing on the act being good or not. Now, could you briefly run through Objectivism's view on metaphysics, on human nature, on epistemology, and on ethics? Just, of course, we can't go into it in detail, certainly in a half-an-hour program, but statements which would state clearly where Objectivism disagrees on each of these four issues.
Well, I would say on all of these four issues. To begin with, the idea that reality consists of a will contradicts everything about objectivist epistemology and the objectivist method. That is, you do not start with wide, undefined, floating abstractions devoid of any rationally defensible or demonstrable meaning. The idea of a will representing reality is just as bad and of the same order as the idea of any philosophical idealist who claims that reality consists of an idea, not somebody's idea, but just an idea. And Schopenhauer's Nietzsche will belongs in the same category. This is why I regard Nietzsche philosophically as a mystic, because reality to him is not real. He does not recognize the objectivity of reality. He is a subjectivist to that extent, to begin with, as you correctly presented. If the ultimate reality is a will, then it means the subjective will, or in fact the whim of any particular individual. That's metaphysically. Epistemologically, Nietzsche did believe that reason is not valid. He's contradicted himself many times on this subject. In some respects, he allowed certain lesser role to reason, as most Platonists do. but in this respect, his most revealing book is the one called The Birth of Tragedy, in which he introduces two principles, the principle of Apollo and of Dionysius, as he calls it. The principle of Apollo is reason, which he regards as contributing certain values and of some importance, but really secondary and subsidiary, as all mystics regard reason. But Dionysius is the symbol or principle of some kind of innate non-rational power, which may be whim, emotion, will, or anything you wish to call it, but which is apart from and superior to reason. And he specifically stated that the Superman would be the man who lives by or functions under the Dionysius principle, not the Apollo principle. Now that is the exact opposite of objectivism, which holds that reason is man's only tool of knowledge, his only tool of values, and that reason is the only faculty of man which should guide him in his actions and in his perception of reality. That is his only tool. There is no other. This is in regard to Nietzsche's epistemology. Now, the way he saw men, as you stated correctly, he believes that men are born with certain innate ideas, characteristics, or dispositions, and that some are born to be supermen and others are born to be slaves. Now, he meant, again, the issue of slaves, he never made it very clear whether he meant it literally and politically or metaphysically, in the sense of an inferior class of beings. And here he is guilty of many contradictions. On the one hand, he was opposed to a political dictatorship or the political state. On the other hand, he claimed that the so-called slave or inferior men are the natural prey for the superman, and that these issues to who belongs where is totally non-objective and deterministic. You are born one way or the other, and you're just then, in effect, an automaton working out his predestined path. Now that's the exact opposite of objectivism, which holds that man is born tabula rasa, that he does not inherit any ideas or any values at birth, that he has to develop his own character, his own values, and his own ideas and knowledge. He has to acquire it by a volitional action of his own mind. That man's mind, which is a volitional faculty, is the tool which establishes not only man's survival and his action against inanimate matter, but also determines and creates his own soul. That is, his, by soul I mean consciousness, his own values. He is not born a superman or an inferior man. He is born a tabula rasa, and he thereafter creates his own character. He is a being of self-made soul, as we would call it. Now, what was the last point you made, or does this cover your question?
On ethics, Nietzsche's principle that the man...
Oh, yes. Now, yes, I remember, thank you. On ethics, Nietzsche believed that your own whim, mind you, not your rational self-interest, but your own desire is the sole standard of the good, and that the good is thoroughly subjective. It's whichever your will happens to choose, whichever it is. Whereas objectivism holds, of course, that morality is the province of reason, that an objective, rational code of morality can and must be established, and that men cannot live successfully by the guidance of anything other than a code of rationally established and demonstrated objective moral values applicable to all men.